You know, people who went through a lot in their childhood don't just carry memories. They often carry a whole set of reflexes, these assumptions that were built for survival way back then, but for some reason, they never really got switched off. So today, we're going to explore these hidden psychological patterns and really get into why they stick around.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a question that gets to the heart of it all. Does this feel familiar to you? We're not talking about big, dramatic flashbacks all the time. Nope. It's usually the small, everyday stuff, like the way your body tenses up when a plan gets canceled, or why a simple compliment can feel, well, kind of suspicious. These are the echoes we're talking about.
And these echoes, they show up in some really confusing ways. Like, you finally get a moment to just chill, but you feel totally on edge. Or someone gives you praise, and your first thought is, okay, what do they want from me? That feeling of panic over a tiny mistake, or that weird discomfort when things are going too well, these aren't just random quirks. They are deeply learned patterns from a nervous system that was basically trained to expect trouble around every corner.
So where does all this come from? Well, to really get it, we have to look at what happens to a child's brain when it's living in a constant state of alarm. And this isn't just about feelings, this is about biology.
The term for this is toxic stress. Now look, regular stress can actually be good for us. It helps us grow. But toxic stress is a whole different beast. The source material explains it perfectly. It's like having a smoke alarm that is just constantly blaring, flooding a kid's developing system with stress chemicals, and there's no one there to help them turn it off.
What's so wild about this is the contrast, right? Healthy stress, it builds resilience. But toxic stress, according to researchers, it physically changes how the brain develops. The parts responsible for emotion and decision-making, basically the command center for how you navigate the world, they actually grow differently. This is the biological root of those lifelong echoes.
Okay, so faced with this constant alarm, a kid doesn't just sit there, they adapt. And here's a really important shift in perspective. What we often look back on as flaws in adulthood were actually brilliant, super intelligent survival tools that a powerless child came up with. So first up, you've got the scanner. This is the child who learns to be hyper-vigilant. They walk into a room and instantly, they're reading the atmosphere, checking every single face for the slightest hint of anger or distress. This isn't paranoia. It's a really smart way to see danger coming before it actually hits.
Then there's the peacemaker. This kid becomes an expert at sensing adult emotions. They figure out that if they can just manage the tension in the room, tell a joke, change the subject, do whatever it takes to smooth things over, they can keep themselves safe.
And while some kids learn to manage the room, other kids learn the complete opposite lesson. They become the chameleon. They figure out that the safest way to get through the day is just be invisible. If you're quiet, if you don't draw any attention to yourself, you can't become a target.
And of course, the people pleaser. This child learns really fast that keeping other people happy creates stability. So they get incredibly good at figuring out what everyone else needs and giving it to them, often at the cost of their own needs, which they just learn to completely ignore.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. This isn't about choice. For a kid in an impossible situation, these strategies aren't just clever tricks. They're essential tools for survival. They make a really bad situation feel just a little bit more bearable.
But here's the catch. The very software that saved you as a kid can start causing some major glitches in your adult life. The world around you has changed, but that internal programming, it hasn't been updated.
Remember that hypervigilant scanner? Well, as an adult, that constant scanning for danger becomes chronic anxiety. Your logical mind knows you're safe, but your body is still 100% convinced that letting your guard down, even for a second, will lead to absolute disaster. And that little peacemaker, they grow up to become the compulsive fixer. They feel this intense responsibility for everyone else's emotional state, spending all their energy trying to solve other people's problems, which leaves them totally exhausted and disconnected from their own needs. And the chameleon, the child who learned to just disappear? As an adult, this can lead to a really profound disconnection from yourself. I mean, after years of making yourself invisible, is it any wonder that it's hard to even know what you truly feel, what you want, or who you even are anymore? Okay, now we need to talk about what might be the hardest part of all of this. It's the deep internal wound that often sits right underneath all of these other behaviors, and that's shame. It is so important to understand the difference between guilt and shame. This slide lays it out perfectly. Guilt is about an action.
It says, I did something bad. And that can actually motivate you to change. But shame is about your identity. It says, I am bad. It attacks the very core of who you believe you are.
And here it is, put in the simplest, most powerful way possible. When bad things happen to a child over and over again, their developing brain just can't make sense of it. It can't comprehend that it's not their fault. So, they internalize the blame, and they come to believe that they are the mistake. That feeling of worthlessness can be the most painful echo of all.
So after hearing all of that, the most important question is, are these patterns permanent? I mean, is your fate just sealed by your childhood? Let's turn to the science on this, because the answer is actually incredibly hopeful.
And look, this isn't just anecdotal stuff. The landmark Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, you'll see it called the ACEs study, looked at over 17,000 people. It found clear, undeniable scientific links between hardship in childhood and struggles in adulthood, everything from mental to physical health, decades down the line. So the data is clear, the patterns are real, and it's really easy to look at all this and think, well, that's it then. My life was basically decided for me before I even had a say. But is that really the case?
And the answer from neuroscience is a resounding no. And it's because of this incredible capacity our brains have called neuroplasticity. It just means your brain can form new pathways, new connections, your entire life. The patterns that you learn for survival are not a life sentence. Change is hard, for sure, but it is absolutely possible.
And maybe the best way to think about that change is with this final thought. Healing isn't about trying to erase the past. It's really about compassion. It's about recognizing that the kid who survived did an incredible job with the only